The torrential rain pounded against the dirt streets of Sweetwater, Texas, transforming them into rivers of mud as Beatrice Keller clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. The year was 1875, and she had nothing left but the soaked dress on her back and a desperate determination that had carried her through 3 days of travel to this remote cattle town. Beatrice's boots sank into the mud as she stumbled toward the only building still showing lights through the downpour, a modest ranch house at the edge of town with a large barn beside it. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the sign that read Double D Ranch for a brief moment before darkness swallowed it again. With trembling hands, she knocked on the door, her stomach twisted with hunger and fear. The door swung open, revealing a tall man with broad shoulders. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Beatrice could see the surprise in his eyes as he took in her drenched appearance. "Please, sir," she managed through chattering teeth. "I'm looking for work, any work. I can cook, clean, tend animals," he cut her off with a raised hand. "Come inside first," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "You'll catch your death out there." Relief flooded through her as she stepped across the threshold. Warmth from a crackling fireplace immediately began to thaw her frozen limbs. The man closed the door behind her, shutting out the howling wind. "Thank you," she whispered, water pooling at her feet on the wooden floor. "Cole Dawson," he introduced himself, removing his hat to reveal dark hair with hints of auburn. "Owner of this ranch." "Beatrice Keller," she replied, trying to stop her body from shaking. "I truly am looking for work, Mr. Dawson. I'm not asking for charity." Cole studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of a summer sky. A small scar crossed his right eyebrow. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into another room. Beatrice stood awkwardly, afraid to move lest she spread more water across his polished floor. The ranch house was modest but well kept, with simple furniture and a few personal touches: a bookshelf filled with volumes, a pair of spurs hanging from a hook, a painting of a mountain landscape. Cole returned with a blanket and a towel. "Here," he offered. "Dry off before you catch pneumonia." She accepted them gratefully. "About the work, we'll discuss that after you've warmed up and had something to eat," he said firmly. "I've got stew on the stove and some fresh bread." Beatrice wanted to protest that she wasn't looking for handouts, but her stomach growled loudly at the mention of food. She hadn't eaten since the previous morning, a stale biscuit she'd saved from the last town. "Thank you," she said again, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "I promise I can work hard." Cole nodded and gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit. I'll bring you a bowl." As he moved to the kitchen, Beatrice sank gratefully into the chair. The fire's warmth began to seep into her bones, and for the first time in days she felt her muscles relax slightly. Cole returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread. "Eat," he encouraged, pulling up another chair across from her. "Then you can tell me what brings a young woman out alone in this weather." Beatrice ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, but her hunger soon won out. The stew was hearty, filled with chunks of beef and vegetables, and the bread was still warm from the oven. "This is delicious," she said between bites. "Did you cook it yourself?" A hint of a smile crossed Cole's face. "I manage, been on my own a while now." "No wife?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. "I apologize, that's none of my business." "No wife," he confirmed. "Just me and a couple of ranch hands who have their own quarters by the barn." He paused. "Now, what's your story, Miss Keller?" Beatrice set down her spoon, suddenly self-conscious. "I was working as a housekeeper for a family in San Antonio. The husband made inappropriate advances. When I refused him, his wife accused me of trying to seduce him. She swallowed hard. They dismissed me without references or my final wages. I've been traveling west looking for work. Cole's jaw tightened. Seems unfair to punish you for a man's dishonorable behavior. Life isn't often fair, Mr. Dawson. Call me Cole, he said, and you're right about that. He studied her for a moment. What skills do you have besides housekeeping? Hope flickered in her chest. I can cook, sew, garden. I grew up on a small farm in Kentucky, so I'm not afraid of animal work. I can help with chickens, milking, that sort of thing. You ride? Yes, though it's been some time. Cole nodded thoughtfully. I could use help around the house. My last housekeeper left to get married 2 months ago, and truth be told, I've been living like a bachelor since. He gestured around. As you can probably tell. Beatrice glanced around the room again. It was neat enough, but she could see dust on the shelves and a pile of mending in a basket by the sofa. I can start immediately, she offered, and I don't require much in terms of wages. I'll pay you fairly, Cole said firmly. There's a small room off the kitchen servants' quarters, I suppose, though I don't much like that term. It has its own entrance and a bed. It's yours if you want it. Beatrice felt tears threatening to form. After days of rejection and doors closing in her face, this man's simple kindness was overwhelming. I accept, she said, her voice steady despite her emotions. Thank you for the opportunity. Don't thank me yet, Cole said with a slight smile. You haven't seen the state of the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, Beatrice found herself laughing. I'm sure I've seen worse. We'll discuss details in the morning, Cole said, standing. For now, let me show you to your room. You need rest. He led her through a cozy kitchen to a small but clean room beyond it. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt stood against one wall, with a small dresser and washstand nearby. A window looked out toward the barn, and a door led to the outside. It's not much, Cole said, lighting the lamp on the dresser. It's perfect, Beatrice replied honestly. After sleeping in barns and on one memorable occasion under a wagon, this room seemed like a palace. There should be some nightclothes in the dresser left by the previous housekeeper. We can see about getting you proper clothes tomorrow. He pointed to a door in the corner. That connects to a small washroom. I had it added last year, modern convenience. Beatrice's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, that's very thoughtful. Cole shifted uncomfortably at her gratitude. Well, good night, Miss Keller. Beatrice, please, she corrected gently. And good night, Cole. Thank you again. He nodded once before leaving, closing the door behind him. Alone in her new room, Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. She hadn't realized how terrified she'd been until this moment, when the fear could finally release its grip. After washing up and changing into a borrowed nightgown that was slightly too large, Beatrice climbed into the bed. The mattress was firm but comfortable, and the clean sheets smelled of lavender. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but for the first time in a long while she felt safe. As she drifted off to sleep, she wondered about the taciturn rancher who had opened his door to a desperate stranger. There was kindness in him, but also a reserve, as if he kept part of himself locked away. She pushed the thought aside. She wasn't here to analyze her employer. She was here to work and rebuild her life. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed world. Beatrice woke early, habit from years of service. She found a simple dress in the dresser that, while a bit loose, would serve until she could afford something better. The kitchen was empty when she entered it. Though she could tell someone had already been there, a coffee pot sat empty on the stove, and crumbs littered the table. She set to work immediately, stoking the stove fire and preparing breakfast. By the time Cole entered from the main house, she had biscuits in the oven and bacon frying in a pan. He stopped in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "You didn't need to start working before we'd even discussed terms." "I'm an early riser," she said simply. "And cooking breakfast seems a small repayment for your kindness last night." Cole poured himself a cup of the fresh coffee she'd made. "Smells good. Better than what I've been making, that's for sure." "Sit," she invited. "It's nearly ready." They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, and Cole outlined what he expected from her. The duties were straightforward: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general upkeep of the house. The pay was generous, more than she'd expected, and included room and board. "I'll introduce you to the ranch hands later," Cole said as he finished his coffee. "Joseph and Franklin, good men, been with me for years. They take their meals in the bunkhouse most days, but sometimes join me for dinner." "How large is your ranch?" Beatrice asked. 3,000 acres, about 800 head of cattle," he replied. "It was my father's before me. Not the biggest spread in Texas, but respectable. We're doing well enough." "It seems like a lot for just 3 men to manage," Cole nodded. "We hire extra hands during roundup and branding. The rest of the time we make do." He stood, placing his hat on his head. "I need to ride out to check the north pasture after the storm. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course," Beatrice assured him. "I have plenty to keep me busy." After Cole left, Beatrice surveyed the house more thoroughly. While not filthy, it certainly needed attention. She rolled up her sleeves and began with the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. By midday, she had also swept the main room and was tackling the accumulated dust. She was on a stepladder, reaching for cobwebs in a corner when a voice startled her. "You must be the new housekeeper." Beatrice turned quickly, too quickly. The ladder wobbled and she felt herself falling. Before she could hit the floor, strong arms caught her. She looked up into the face of a man she didn't recognize, young, perhaps in his early 20s, with a friendly smile. "Franklin Davies," he introduced himself, setting her carefully on her feet. "I work for Mr. Dawson." "Beatrice Keller," she replied, brushing dust from her borrowed dress. "Yes, I started today. Boss mentioned he hired someone, said we're to help you with anything heavy." Franklin glanced around at her progress. "Place looks better already." "Thank you," Beatrice said, returning to more solid ground. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Just came to get the medicine box. One of the Kevs got caught in some wire." Beatrice helped him locate the box of veterinary supplies, and Franklin thanked her before hurrying back to the barn. Through the window, she watched him jog across the yard, joined by an older man who must be Joseph. By the time Cole returned in the late afternoon, Beatrice had made significant progress on the house, prepared a hearty stew for dinner, and even found time to begin sorting through the mending basket. Cole's eyes widened as he stepped through the door. "I hardly recognize the place." "I still have much to do," Beatrice said, wiping her hands on her apron. "But it's a start." "More than a start," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door, a peg she'd installed that very afternoon. He noticed it with a raised eyebrow. "The hooks were in a drawer," she explained. "Seemed more practical than leaving hats on chairs." A small smile tugged at his lips. "You're efficient, Miss Keller." "Beatrice," she reminded him. "And thank you, dinner will be ready in about an hour. I'll just go wash up then." He paused at the door to his bedroom. "Thank you for all of this." That evening they ate dinner together in the dining room, which Beatrice had cleaned thoroughly. The conversation was sparse at first, but as the meal progressed, they found themselves talking more easily. "How long have you been running the ranch?" she asked. "Took over completely when my father died 8 years ago," Cole replied, "but I've been working it since I was a boy." "And your mother?" A shadow passed over his face. She died when I was 12. Fever took her. I'm sorry, Beatrice said softly. I lost my parents too in a fire when I was 18. That's when I went into service. Cole's eyes met hers, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. It's not easy being alone in the world, no, she agreed. It isn't. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Beatrice rose early each morning to prepare breakfast before Cole and the ranch hands headed out for the day's work. She spent her days transforming the house, one room at a time, until the entire place shone with care and attention. Cole often returned to find new improvements: curtains she'd sewn from fabric found in a trunk, shelves rearranged more practically, a vase of wildflowers on the table. At first, he seemed slightly bemused by these changes, but soon he began to appreciate them. Never realized how bare the place was until you started adding these touches, he commented one evening, fingering the edge of a doily she'd placed under a lamp. A house should feel like a home, Beatrice said simply. They fell into the habit of sharing dinner together each evening, their conversations growing longer and more personal as the days passed. Beatrice learned that Cole had fought in the Civil War, serving in the Confederate cavalry, despite his personal misgivings about slavery. I was young, he explained one night as they sat by the fire after dinner. Caught up in the idea of defending Texas, it didn't take long to see the horror of it all. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Kentucky, her dreams of someday having a small farm of her own, and the circumstances that had led her to Texas. Men can be dishonorable creatures, Cole said with distaste when she elaborated on her dismissal from her previous position. Not all men, Beatrice replied softly, meeting his gaze. Something flickered in his eyes, and for a moment the air between them seemed to change. Then he cleared his throat and stood. It's getting late. I should turn in. 2 weeks after her arrival, Cole approached her as she hung laundry in the yard. I'm riding into town tomorrow for supplies, he said. Thought you might want to come along, get some fabric for dresses that actually fit. Beatrice looked down at the borrowed dress she was wearing, pinned and tucked to accommodate her smaller frame. That would be wonderful, thank you. We'll leave after breakfast, he said with a nod. Sweetwater wasn't a large town, but it had grown substantially in recent years with the expansion of the cattle trade. Beatrice sat beside Cole on the wagon bench as they rode in, acutely aware of his presence, the width of his shoulders, the strength in his hands as he held the reins, the clean scent of soap and leather that surrounded him. We'll start at Milner's General Store, Cole said as they pulled up to the hitching post on the main street. They have a good selection of fabric and notions. The store was busy with morning shoppers, and Beatrice felt eyes on her as she entered with Cole. She realized suddenly how it might look: a young woman arriving with the eligible bachelor rancher who had previously lived alone. Mrs. Milner, a plump woman with shrewd eyes, approached immediately. Mr. Dawson, how nice to see you in town. Her gaze shifted to Beatrice with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Milner, Cole greeted her with a tip of his hat. This is Miss Keller, my new housekeeper. She needs some fabric for dresses and whatever other personal items she might require. Of course, Mrs. Milner said, her expression softening somewhat. Come with me, dear. We have some lovely new calicos just arrived from back east. As Beatrice followed the shopkeeper to the fabric section, she overheard a whispered conversation between two women examining ribbons nearby. Housekeeper, he says. Is that what they're calling it these days? Well, James Wilson saw her arrive during that terrible storm 2 weeks ago. Said she looked like a drowned rat. Heat rose in Beatrice's cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. Small towns thrived on gossip, and she knew better than to show it affected her. Mrs. Milner proved more kind than her customers, helping Beatrice select several practical fabrics and the necessary supplies for sewing. Cole insisted on paying for everything, waving away her protests. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said. "You can't work effectively without proper clothing." Their next stop was the apothecary, where Cole purchased various medicines and tonics for the ranch. As they walked back to the wagon, a tall, elegantly dressed woman stepped directly into their path. "Cole Dawson," she said, her voice carrying a note of reproach. "You've been back in town for weeks without calling on me." Beatrice watched as Cole's expression closed slightly. "Miss Thornton," he acknowledged with a slight bow. "I've been busy with the ranch." The woman, Miss Thornton, was beautiful in a polished way, with auburn hair arranged in an elaborate style and a dress that spoke of considerable wealth. Her eyes flicked to Beatrice, taking in her simple appearance with a dismissive glance. "And who is this?" she asked, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care. "Beatrice Keller, my housekeeper," Cole introduced her briefly. "Miss Victoria Thornton, daughter of Henry Thornton, who owns the bank." "How quaint," Victoria said with a thin smile. "Tell me, Cole, will you be attending the Founders' Day dance next Saturday? Father specifically mentioned hoping to see you there." Cole shifted uncomfortably. "I hadn't planned on it." "Oh, but you must," Victoria insisted, placing a gloved hand on his arm. "Everyone will be there, and it's for charity." "I'll consider it," he said noncommittally. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have other errands to complete." Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course." "Don't be a stranger, Cole." She nodded curtly to Beatrice before sweeping past them down the boardwalk. "Friend of yours?" Beatrice asked as they continued to the wagon. Cole loaded their purchases into the back before answering. "Her father and mine were business associates. The Thorntons have been trying to arrange a match between Victoria and me for years. She seems determined," Beatrice observed carefully. A wry smile touched Cole's lips. "That's one word for it." He helped Beatrice onto the wagon seat before climbing up beside her. "Victoria has decided I'm her project, the rough rancher she'll civilize and bring into proper society." "And you're not interested in being civilized?" Beatrice asked, a smile playing at her lips. Cole glanced at her, something warm in his gaze. "Not by Victoria Thornton." The ride back to the ranch was pleasant, with Cole pointing out various landmarks and sharing stories about the area's history. Beatrice found herself laughing more than she had in years, drawn to his dry humor and thoughtful observations. That evening, as she sat by the fire sewing a new dress from the fabric they'd purchased, she caught Cole watching her, his book forgotten in his lap. "What is it?" she asked, needle pausing. "Nothing," he said, returning his attention to his book. "Just, the house feels different with you here." "Different good or different bad?" A smile crossed his face, softening his features. "Different good." The following week brought cattle buyers to the Double D, keeping Cole busy with negotiations and paperwork. Beatrice made sure the house was spotless for their visits and prepared impressive meals that had the buyers complimenting Cole on his good fortune in finding such a skilled housekeeper. "Miss Keller is a blessing," one buyer said as they concluded their business on the porch. "You'd best be careful, Dawson, or someone will steal her away." Beatrice, who was bringing coffee to the men, saw Cole's jaw tighten slightly. "Miss Keller is free to make her own choices," he said evenly. "But I hope she'll find the Double D to her liking for a good long while." That Saturday morning, as Beatrice kneaded bread dough in the kitchen, Cole entered looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "About that Founders' Day dance tonight," he began, leaning against the doorframe. "I've decided to attend after all. The ranch could benefit from the connections." "That seems sensible," Beatrice replied, trying to ignore the strange disappointment she felt at the thought of him escorting Victoria Thornton. Cole cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might like to accompany me, as my guest," he added quickly. "Not not as staff." Beatrice's hands stilled in the dough. "Me? But surely Miss Thornton expects—" "I don't particularly care what Miss Thornton expects," Cole interrupted. "I'd like to go with you if you're willing." Heart fluttering in her chest, Beatrice tried to maintain a composed expression. "I'd be honored, Cole, but I don't have anything suitable to wear to such an event." A smile spread across his face. "I thought you might say that." He stepped into the hallway and returned with a large box. "This arrived yesterday when you were working in the garden. I took the liberty." Beatrice wiped her hands on her apron and opened the box. Inside lay a beautiful dress of deep blue silk, simpler than the fashionable gowns Victoria would wear, but elegant and perfectly suited to Beatrice's taste. "Cole," she breathed, touching the fabric reverently. "It's beautiful, but I couldn't possibly accept, please," he said softly. "Consider it a thank you for all you've done here." Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Beatrice felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'll wear it with pride." That evening, as Beatrice prepared for the dance, she felt uncharacteristically nervous. She arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style and donned the blue dress, which fit as if it had been made for her. Looking in the small mirror of her room, she hardly recognized herself. A knock at her door startled her from her contemplation. "Beatrice, are you ready?" Cole called. She opened the door, and the expression on his face made her heart skip. He stared at her for a long moment, his eyes taking in every detail. "You look—" he began, then seemed to lose his words. "Beautiful doesn't seem adequate." Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." And he did, dressed in a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His hair was neatly combed, though a stubborn lock still fell across his forehead. The town hall had been transformed for the dance, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and flowers decorating every available surface. As Cole helped Beatrice from the wagon, she felt the curious stares of the townspeople. "Everyone's looking at us," she whispered. "Let them look," Cole replied, offering his arm. "I'm escorting the most beautiful woman in Texas." The evening passed in a whirl of music and conversation. Cole introduced her to various townspeople, always as Miss Beatrice Keller, with no mention of her position as his housekeeper. Some received her warmly, while others, particularly those in Victoria Thornton's social circle, were coolly polite. Victoria herself approached them as they stood by the refreshment table. "Cole, you decided to come after all," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And with your housekeeper." "How unexpected." "Miss Keller is my guest tonight," Cole replied firmly, "and I'd appreciate if you'd treat her with the respect she deserves." Victoria's lips tightened. "Of course. Will you save me a dance, Cole? Father is particularly interested in discussing that northern parcel of your land." "I'm afraid my dance card is full this evening," Cole said, his hand coming to rest lightly on Beatrice's back. After Victoria stormed off, Beatrice turned to him with concern. "You shouldn't antagonize her. Her father could make things difficult for you." Cole's expression was determined. "I won't let anyone disrespect you, Beatrice, not even the banker's daughter." When the band began playing a slow waltz, Cole led her onto the dance floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her through the steps with surprising grace. "You're a good dancer," she observed, looking up at him. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied with a slight smile. "Said no son of hers would stumble around a dance floor like a newborn calf." Beatrice laughed, and as their eyes met, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. For that moment, There was only the music and the two of them moving together in perfect harmony. The spell was broken by a commotion at the entrance. A man burst in, his clothes dusty from the trail. "Fire at the Peterson place," he shouted. "They need help." The music stopped abruptly. Cole immediately released Beatrice and moved toward the messenger along with several other men. "How bad?" someone asked. "Barn's gone up completely, trying to save the house. Need all the hands they can get." Without hesitation, Cole turned to Beatrice. "I have to go." "Of course," she said, understanding immediately. "Be careful." He squeezed her hand briefly before joining the group of men heading for the door. Beatrice watched him go, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. The dance dissolved as many of the men left to help fight the fire. Beatrice found herself stranded, uncertain what to do when Franklin approached her. "Miss Keller, I came with Joseph in our wagon. We can take you back to the ranch if you'd like." Grateful for his thoughtfulness, Beatrice accepted. As they rode back, she could see the glow of the fire in the distance, and her prayers went out to both the Peterson family and the men fighting to save their home. Back at the ranch, Beatrice found she couldn't sleep. She paced the kitchen, keeping coffee hot for when Cole returned. It was past midnight when she heard horses in the yard. Cole entered the kitchen, his face and clothes smudged with soot, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He stopped short when he saw her. "You're still up," he said, surprise in his voice. Beatrice poured him coffee and set it on the table. "I couldn't sleep not knowing if you were safe." She took in his appearance with concern. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired," he assured her, sinking into a chair. "We managed to save the house, but the barn's a total loss." "Thank God no people or animals were injured." "What happened?" "Lightning strike, they think," Cole replied, gratefully accepting the cup. "From that storm last week. Must have smoldered in the hay for days before finally catching." Beatrice placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You should rest." "I'll heat water for a bath." Cole covered her hand with his own, keeping her beside him. "Beatrice," he said softly, "thank you for caring." Their eyes met, and Beatrice felt something shift between them. Cole stood slowly, their bodies suddenly close in the quiet kitchen. His hand came up to touch her cheek, and she leaned into his palm, her heart racing. "I should have told you before," he said, his voice low. "Having you here, it's changed everything." Before she could respond, he lowered his head and kissed her. His lips were gentle against hers, questioning rather than demanding. Beatrice responded without hesitation, her hands coming to rest on his chest as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the night you arrived on my doorstep." "I've wanted you to," she admitted, a smile curving her lips. A shout from outside broke the moment. "Boss, we got trouble with that injured calf." Cole closed his eyes briefly, clearly reluctant to leave. "I have to go," Beatrice urged, touching his face gently. "We'll talk tomorrow." He pressed another quick kiss to her lips before heading back out into the night. Beatrice touched her fingers to her mouth, hardly believing what had just happened. The rugged rancher who had taken her in had somehow captured her heart completely. Morning brought new challenges. Cole was already gone when Beatrice awoke, having left at dawn to help the Petersons salvage what they could from their barn. She spent the day anxiously awaiting his return, uncertain where they stood after last night's kiss. It was late afternoon when he finally returned, looking even more exhausted than before. Beatrice met him at the door with concern. "You need rest," she insisted, taking his hat. "I've prepared a bath and there's stew keeping warm." Cole caught her hand as she turned away. "Beatrice, about last night, you don't need to explain," she said quickly, afraid he might regret his actions. "Yes, I do." His expression was serious but tender. I'm not a man who acts impulsively, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. What I feel for you, it's not something I expected, but it's real. More real than anything I've felt before." Joy bloomed in Beatrice's chest. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "But I'm your employee and people will talk, let them talk," Cole interrupted. "I don't care what anyone thinks except you." He took both her hands in his. "I know it's soon, but I've never been more certain of anything. I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Keller." Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you too." The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet joy as their relationship deepened. Cole insisted that Beatrice no longer act as his housekeeper, though she continued to care for the house out of choice rather than obligation. They hired a local girl, Molly, to help with the heavier housework, and Cole made it clear to everyone that Beatrice's status had changed. Not everyone approved. Victoria Thornton made her displeasure known throughout town, spreading rumors about Beatrice's character and Cole's judgment. Henry Thornton suddenly called in a loan on some of Cole's equipment, forcing him to scramble to meet the payment. "They can't hurt us," Cole assured Beatrice one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "The ranch is doing well, and I have other banking options in the next county if needed." "I never meant to cause trouble for you," Beatrice said worriedly. Cole pulled her closer to his side. "You've brought nothing but happiness into my life. The Thorntons' disapproval is a small price to pay." One Sunday morning in August, nearly 3 months after Beatrice had arrived at the Double D, Cole suggested they ride to his favorite spot on the property, a small hill overlooking a creek where wildflowers grew in abundance. The day was perfect, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that kept the Texas heat at bay. They spread a blanket beneath an old oak tree and shared the lunch Beatrice had packed. After they ate, Cole seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous. Beatrice watched him curiously as he paced a few steps away, then turned back to her. "I brought you here for a reason," he finally said. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. Cole knelt before her on the blanket. "Beatrice Keller, you came to my door looking for work, but you've given me so much more than your labor. You've brought light and warmth back into my life and my home." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond. "I love you with all my heart. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness blurred Beatrice's vision. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't want a long engagement," he murmured. "Is a month too soon?" Beatrice laughed. "A month is perfect." News of their engagement spread quickly through Sweetwater. Many of the townspeople offered their congratulations, though Victoria Thornton and her circle remained coldly aloof. "You think they'll ever accept us?" Beatrice asked as they left church one Sunday, feeling the stares of the Thornton group. "Some will, some won't," Cole replied pragmatically. "All that matters is that we have each other." The wedding took place on a beautiful September day at the Double D Ranch. They decided to hold it there rather than in town, inviting only those who had shown them support and friendship. Pastor Williams from the local church performed the ceremony under an arch of flowers that Joseph and Franklin had constructed beside the oak tree where Cole had proposed. Beatrice wore a gown of ivory silk that Cole had ordered from San Antonio, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Cole waited for her beneath the arch, his expression one of wonder as she walked toward him on Franklin's arm. "You are the most beautiful sight I've ever seen," he whispered as she reached him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand beside each other through all of life's challenges and joys. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers as Cole pulled Beatrice into a tender kiss. The celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing in the yard. As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the impromptu dance floor where Cole held his bride close during a slow waltz. "Happy Mrs. Dawson," he murmured against her ear. Beatrice smiled up at her husband. "More than I ever thought possible." Later that night, after their guests had departed, Cole carried Beatrice across the threshold of the main house, now truly her home as well. Their coming together as husband and wife was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them over the past months. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the sheets, Beatrice traced the line of Cole's jaw with her fingertips. "When I knocked on your door that night, I was only hoping for work," she said softly. "I never imagined I'd find a home and love." Cole captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "When I told you to come inside, I was just trying to get you out of the rain. I had no idea I was inviting my future into my home." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Dawsons. The ranch prospered under their joint care, with Beatrice proving to have a good head for business that complemented Cole's practical ranching knowledge. They expanded their operations, adding sheep to diversify their livestock and planting orchards that Beatrice tended with loving care. In their second year of marriage, Beatrice gave birth to a son they named William, after Cole's father. The boy had his father's blue eyes and his mother's gentle spirit. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, who from her earliest days showed signs of inheriting Cole's determination. Victoria Thornton eventually married a businessman from Dallas and left Sweetwater, much to the Dawsons' relief. Over time, even Henry Thornton came to respect the success of the Double D Ranch, eventually approaching Cole about joint business ventures. "Funny how money changes people's attitudes," Cole commented wryly after one such meeting. "It's not the money," Beatrice corrected him. "It's seeing that what we have is real and lasting." On a rainy spring evening, 10 years after Beatrice had first arrived at the Double D, she stood at the kitchen window watching the downpour with a smile on her face. Cole approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about, looking so happy?" he asked. Beatrice leaned back against his chest. "I was remembering another rainy night, when a desperate woman knocked on a stranger's door." Cole turned her in his arms to face him. At 40, he was still handsome, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a few strands of silver at his temples that Beatrice found utterly appealing. "Best decision I ever made," he said, "telling you to come inside." "Best decision I ever made was knocking," she replied, reaching up to touch his face lovingly. From outside came the sound of children's laughter as William and Elizabeth, now 8 and 6, splashed in puddles under the watchful eye of Joseph, who had become like a grandfather to them. "We should call them in before they're soaked through," Beatrice said, though she made no move to leave Cole's embrace. "In a minute," Cole murmured, lowering his head to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their wedding day. "I'm busy thanking God for rainstorms and stubborn women who refuse to give up." Beatrice smiled against his lips. "And I'm thanking him for kind-hearted cowboys who open their doors to strangers." Outside, the rain continued to fall, nourishing the land just as their love had nourished the life. They'd built together a life neither had imagined possible on that stormy night when a woman begging for work had found so much more than employment. And a lonely rancher had discovered that opening his door meant opening his heart to a love that would last a lifetime. 5 years later, The Double D Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous properties in the county. Cole and Beatrice had added another child to their family, a son named James, now 4 years old, who had his mother's gentle brown eyes and his father's determined chin. The 3 Dawson children filled the once quiet ranch house with laughter and energy. On the 15th anniversary of the night Beatrice had arrived at the ranch, Cole surprised her with a party, inviting friends from throughout the region. The celebration was held in the large barn, decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. Many of the guests had witnessed their journey from employer and employee to husband and wife, and the toasts celebrated not just their marriage but the community they had helped build. To Cole and Beatrice, Franklin raised his glass, now the foreman of the ranch and married himself to a local school teacher, who taught all of us what it means to find love in unexpected places. As the evening progressed, Cole pulled Beatrice away from the festivities for a private moment outside. The stars shone brightly overhead, and in the distance, they could see the lights of Sweetwater, which had grown into a proper town with a railway station and new businesses. "I have something for you," Cole said, producing a small box from his pocket. Beatrice opened it to find a gold locket. Inside was a miniature painting of their 3 children on one side, and on the other, an inscription. "From the storm came sunshine." "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears in her eyes as he fastened it around her neck. "Not as beautiful as you," Cole replied, taking her hands in his. 15 years ago you knocked on my door and my life has been better every day since." Beatrice squeezed his hands. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't answered, or if I'd gone to another ranch?" "Sometimes," Cole admitted. "But then I think that somehow we would have found each other anyway. Some things are just meant to be." As they returned to the celebration, William, now 13 and showing every sign of becoming as tall as his father, approached them with an urgent expression. "Pa, Mr. Peterson says there's a lady asking for you both at the house. Says she's come a long way." Exchanging curious glances, Cole and Beatrice made their way back to the main house. On the porch stood an elegantly dressed older woman they didn't recognize. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson?" she inquired, her accent distinctly Eastern. "Yes," Cole confirmed, his arm protectively around Beatrice's waist. "How can we help you?" The woman smiled, revealing familiar features that suddenly made Beatrice gasp. "Margaret," she whispered, hardly daring to believe. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, it's me, Beatrice." "Your cousin Margaret." Beatrice stepped forward in shock. "But how we lost touch after the fire. I thought you were in Boston." "I was," Margaret confirmed. "I've been searching for you for years. When your letters stopped coming, I feared the worst. It was only when I saw an article in a livestock journal about the innovative methods at the Double D Ranch, with a mention of its owners Cole and Beatrice Dawson, that I dared hope it might be you." Overcome with emotion, Beatrice embraced her cousin. Margaret had been her only living relative after the fire that claimed her parents, but they had lost contact when Beatrice began her journey west. "You must stay with us," Cole insisted, ever hospitable. "We're celebrating our anniversary tonight, and having family join us makes it even more special." Margaret's arrival brought a new dimension to their celebration. As the only link to Beatrice's past, she shared stories of their childhood in Kentucky that delighted the Dawson children. She also brought news of an inheritance, a small property in Kentucky that had belonged to Beatrice's grandmother and had finally been released from legal complications. "It's not much," Margaret explained as they sat in the parlor after the party, "but it's rightfully yours. I've brought the papers for you to sign." Beatrice looked to Cole, who smiled warmly. "It's your birthright," he said, "though I hope you don't plan to leave Texas for Kentucky." Laughing, Beatrice squeezed his hand. "Never, but perhaps we could visit someday, show the children where I came from." "I'd like that," Cole agreed. Margaret stayed for a month, becoming a beloved aunt to the children and forming a strong friendship with Cole. When she finally departed, it was with promises of regular visits and correspondence. "Your family has grown," Cole observed as they watched Margaret's stagecoach disappear down the road. "First you had me, then the children, and now Margaret back in your life." "God has been good to us," Beatrice agreed, leaning against his shoulder. As the years passed, the Dawson family continued to flourish. William, following in his father's footsteps, developed a keen interest in ranching and introduced new breeding techniques that improved their stock. Elizabeth, strong-willed and intelligent, insisted on attending college, unusual for a young woman in the 1890s, but her parents supported her dreams. James, the youngest, showed an artistic talent that they encouraged, filling the house with his drawings and later paintings of the ranch and its surroundings. Cole and Beatrice weathered the inevitable storms of life together, drought years that threatened the ranch, Elizabeth's dangerous bout with pneumonia when she was 16, the economic panic of 1893 that forced them to tighten their belts. Through it all, their partnership remained strong, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. They traveled to Kentucky when William was 17, visiting the small property that had been Beatrice's inheritance and connecting with distant relatives. The journey gave their children a better understanding of their mother's roots and the circumstances that had led her to Texas. "It's beautiful here," Cole acknowledged as they stood on a hill overlooking the bluegrass countryside. "But I'm glad the rain brought you to my door instead of keeping you here." "So am I," Beatrice agreed, leaning into his embrace. By the turn of the century, with the children grown or nearly so, Cole and Beatrice found themselves entering a new phase of life. William had married Sarah, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they lived in a smaller house built on the Double D property. Elizabeth was completing her studies at a women's college in the East, writing long letters about her plans to become a teacher. James, at 16, was developing into a thoughtful young man with dreams of studying art formally. On a quiet evening in 1901, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 25 years ago, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a desperate hope," she said softly. "I could never have imagined this life we've built." Cole, his hair now more silver than brown but his blue eyes as bright as ever, took her hand. "I was just a lonely man with a too-big house before you came along. You gave me everything that matters: love, family, purpose." "We gave those things to each other," Beatrice corrected gently. In the distance, they could see William and Sarah walking hand in hand near the creek, their first child, a boy named Cole after his grandfather, toddling between them. The sight filled Beatrice with profound gratitude. "You have any regrets?" she asked Cole. "About any of it?" Cole considered her question seriously, as was his way. "Only one," he finally answered. "That I didn't kiss you the first night you arrived, wet clothes and all." Beatrice laughed, the sound as youthful and joyous as it had been when they first fell in love. "That might have been scandalous, even for a progressive rancher like yourself." "Worth the scandal," Cole insisted, leaning over to kiss her now, his lips as tender and loving as they had been on their wedding day. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket against the cooling air. Above them, stars appeared one by one in the vast Texas sky, witnesses to a love story that had begun on a stormy night when a desperate woman knocked on a stranger's door. "I love you, Beatrice Dawson," Cole murmured, his arms secure around her shoulders. "And I love you, Cole Dawson," she replied, resting her head against his heart. "In this life and whatever comes after." In the years that followed, the Double D Ranch continued to thrive under the joint leadership of Cole, Beatrice, and their oldest son, William. They weathered the changing times together, adapting to new technologies and methods while maintaining the core values that had made their ranch successful. Elizabeth returned from college and opened a school in Sweetwater, eventually marrying a young doctor who had come west seeking opportunity. James pursued his artistic talents, studying in New York before returning to Texas, where his paintings of Western landscapes gained recognition and acclaim. Cole and Beatrice's partnership remained the heart of the family, their love a steady foundation that supported not only their children, but the entire community they had helped build. The story of how they met became legendary in Sweetwater: the desperate woman in the rain, the kind-hearted cowboy who opened his door, and the love that had grown from that simple act of compassion. On their 50th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, Cole raised a toast to his beloved wife. Though they were both in their 70s now, the spark between them remained undimmed by time. "To Beatrice," he said, his voice still strong despite his years, "who taught me that the greatest treasures often arrive in the most unexpected ways, sometimes even in a rainstorm." His eyes, as blue and clear as ever, held hers across the table. "Thank you for knocking on my door and for sharing this journey with me. Every day with you has been a blessing." Beatrice's smile, as radiant as it had been in her youth, lit her face as she raised her own glass. "And to Cole, who reminded me that sometimes the kindness of a stranger can change the course of a life. Thank you for telling me to come inside first." As their family and friends joined the toast, the love between them was palpable, a testament to the enduring power of an unexpected beginning, and the beautiful story that had unfolded from that rainy night in Sweetwater, Texas, when a desperate young woman had found not just shelter, but a home for her heart.